Welcome to another episode of the Manga Mavericks podcast on allcomic.com. This is episode 11, and we are a podcast not only dedicated to talking about manga as a medium, but as an industry. I'm Colton.
And I'm Sid.
And as always, we got a ton of news to talk about, and we even have a slight, on my part...
A discussion piece.
A discussion, yes. I mean, I was going to say a mini discussion because I don't know if I have more than 20 minutes worth of thoughts on what we're talking about today.
That's still a long time for discussion.
I guess. I mean, this is coming from a guy who produces like 2 to 3 hour podcasts, so 20 minutes is like a mini discussion for me. But I did say last episode that I was going to finally read something, and that something was going to be Tokyo Ghoul. I read the first volume, at the very least, just to kind of give it a taste, because I think I talked about it last episode. I wasn't really sure if I liked it enough to, read more than that. So I wanted to at least give some of my first impressions and what I think of the series and maybe where I think it'll head as a person who hasn't read more than that since then. But I mean, I think, Sid, you were telling me that you were going to read more than that. How much of Tokyo Ghoul did you read?
I managed to get through about half of it. All the volumes that Wiz has released so far.
Okay, cool. I was just asking out of curiosity, so I'm sure maybe you'll have more to say than me, but I do kind of want to talk briefly about my thoughts about Tokyo Ghoul. I mean, Sid read more than I did, but that's okay because I really wasn't planning on reading more than a volume anyway. So, here it is. This is what I think of Tokyo Ghoul. I thought it was okay. I read the first volume. I read all, 8 or 9 chapters. I feel... I'm not sure if my opinion's very fair, because a lot of the first volume it's really just all set up, and it's a lot of the main character having basically his kind of inner struggle about transitioning from becoming a human to becoming a ghoul, as it's known in their universe. Which that was something that kind of struck me, was that there are just these beings, these creatures running around disguising themselves as humans and eating human flesh, and people just kind of like nonchalantly report about this on the news, and it's just a thing that exists in this world. That kind of caught me off guard, honestly. I wasn't really expecting that. It's kind of like, well, to a lesser extent, it's kind of like in Dragon Ball, how like there are just dinosaurs that roam around, and there are just like animal people running around, and that just like integrate themselves into society. I don't know, that caught me off guard. That, and I don't know, like, I feel like I'd have to read more of this to really gain a full opinion on it, but from what I've read, I didn't dislike it, so that's a thing, but I didn't love it either. I don't know, like, again, it is a lot of setup, and the very few fights that are in the first volume they didn't really impress me very much, though I do think, I don't know anything about Tokyo Ghoul past the ending of the first volume, so I don't know where the story goes from here, but I'm assuming hopefully it becomes as the action and as the fights progress, that hopefully they get better, because there were some points where I couldn't tell what was going on, and some of the action was a little hard to discern.
Well, there are fights in Tokyo Ghoul, definitely. I've read about half the series at this point. All 7 English volumes of this have put out so far. I guess you would. I don't know if I would necessarily call it a battle focus series. Like, there are a lot of fights. I mean, every arc has a fight, sure. But I wouldn't say that any of the fights really necessarily stand out to me as fights in of themselves, like in terms of the action. I think that what carries like most of the action in the series has to do with the emotions of the character behind the characters who are fighting, and like the struggle for survival that most of the fights entail. Probably the most engaging fight, I would say, would be Toka and this girl, Hina. I I think it's just Hina, fighting against this really crazy, this crazy, ghoul inspector who was working for the government, who, killed, Hina's parents, and, is using, their powers, their kinks against her, and, he wants to harvest Hina's kink because it has the best of her parents' two kinks, so, that was a very desperate fight. It was a real struggle for survival. There was a lot of emotions riding on the line, and it was a hard-fought victory. And so I've definitely felt the tension and emotions in that. In other scenarios, just random action between characters, maybe not so much. Just general action in Tokyo Ghoul I don't think is necessarily impressive, but I think that what makes Tokyo Ghoul interesting has more to do with its exploration on kind of what defines humanity, what makes someone human, how do you lose your humanity, and then also just character development. So that's what I think is probably the most interesting part about Tokyo Ghoul. I will say that before we were wondering why Tokyo Ghoul was so popular, why it sells so really well. So to compare with Attack on Titan takes takes a subject matter that's extremely popular in popular culture, zombies, in the same vein, and zombies, and it makes a zombie survival story that ups the stakes and kind of disguises that it is a zombie survival story. In the same way, Tokyo Ghoul takes the other most popular kind of fictional monster in our popular culture, vampires. It takes a vampire story and basically all that, what that entails, and it transplants it into this mediation on morality and humanity and all of that. And probably the thing that I can't not compare it to, it just immediately came to my mind while reading Tokyo Ghoul. Tokyo Ghoul is very similar to Parasite in what it sets out to do, in terms of these ghouls simply exist and they have to eat human flesh. There's just no other option for them to survive. And the crisis is from a human perspective, that seems awful, that seems horrible, that seems monstrous. But for ghouls, that's just how they have to live, and some of them do struggle with that. Some of them want to live alongside other human beings, and they have human friends that they care about very deeply. And the struggle with them is that there's always this tension, this hunger inside them that they want to eat, that they need to eat human beings. But at the same time, they are very much human beings themselves. There is nothing about how the way they think or how they even look that separates them apart from a normal human being. And this is probably the most distinct difference from Parasite, in that the parasites were very much not human in the way they thought. They had a very matter-of-fact, animalistic outlook on survival and the world. And they definitely did not have any, moral problems or any real concerns about...
They had no remorse for killing their own kind.
No remorse for killing their own kind. More importantly, they didn't think twice about killing human beings for food, because that was something that was just a matter of course for them.
Yeah.
With a lot of the ghoul characters in Tokyo Ghoul, especially the protagonist, they have at least one human connection that they really care about, that they could not live without, whose relationship and friendship to them means a lot. And the struggle with that is that they are ultimately have to prey on human flesh. They have to consume human flesh. Some of them cannot do that directly, and so that's why there's this whole community of ghouls who are try to be pacifistic and stick together, and they don't go after live human beings. They go and find freshly deceased corpses or of like people who have died in accidents or stuff, and they harvest that meat and they distribute it to the community and to people who are too afraid or are uncomfortable with killing human beings themselves. So there's nothing like that in Parasite. There's only one character really in Parasite who makes an attempt of understanding humans and trying to become human, and that's Reiko Tamura, who by the end of her character arc had kind of transitioned, especially as the feelings of a mother, but also just what it feels to care about someone in the way a human being does, and human connections. And
I see. I actually, now that I think about it, I think that's probably the key difference between Tokyo Ghoul and Parasite, if we're still going to make the comparison, is that I think the key difference is that I think compared to Tokyo Ghoul, I think Parasite is probably a better example of an all-out. I mean, it deals with the same themes of humanity and what exactly that means or what defines humanity, but I feel like Parasite comparatively is definitely more of a battle manga than Tokyo Ghoul is by a long shot.
Yeah, I think Parasite has a much stronger mediation on like its moral themes and its themes of what defines a human being in terms of Shinichi's character arc and how his Stru being made into more of a parasite human hybrid thanks to Migi, how his like the way he thinks changes, how his body changes, he starts to feel less like a human, and he struggles with that throughout the course of the series. In contrast, Kaneki in Tokyo Ghoul, really ghouls in Tokyo Ghoul, there's nothing that necessarily makes them act or think in a way dissimilar to other human beings. They're pretty much human beings in every other way, other than the fact that they have to eat human flesh to survive, and they have these powers that they can summon, these kinks that they can use to fight and, hunt their prey with. I think that's one of the big differences between the two, and I also think that's one of the weaknesses of Tokyo Ghoul, is that it's not really a strong, in terms of the themes it's tackling, I don't think it does it quite as well as Parasite does. And also, I think that one of the things that I think really hurts Tokyo Ghoul at times is that it does have this tendency to really go for like shock value or have these like ridiculously sadistic characters who they're not necessarily unentertaining. There's this one arc with this character called the Gourmet, who I actually really find amusing. And his whole thing is that he's a ghoul who likes to take human body parts, and he likes to prepare them in like kind of in a artsy food way. he cooks that, like he likes to experiment with cooking. He likes to think of himself as having refined palate. He doesn't, unlike other ghouls, he doesn't just simply take human flesh and eat it just like raw. He like takes it and he like tries to dress it up, garnish it, put all sorts of dressings, trimmings on it, whatever. Like, he considers himself like an elite, aristocratic kind of person. And he's kind of ridiculous. Like, and also he's kind of weird because his whole thing is that he wants to eat Kaneki because he's a half human, half ghoul hybrid, and he wonders how that would taste. So he orchestrates this elaborate scheme where he lures Kaneki to this battle coliseum that he holds, where a bunch of ghouls like gather and pit human beings that they've captured like against one another and like in a fight to the death, and then they eat the like losers. And that kind of devalues kind of the more thoughtful, like ruminations on what moral crises and whatever, because you're having like such a ridiculous display and spectacle of like just like literally characters or holding an underground coliseum, like to and pitting like humans in a fight to a death and then like eating them. Like it kind of devalues a lot of the ghouls as a community, kind of, and like their struggle, because the whole thing in Tokyo Ghoul, like something that they really like to comment about, is how ghouls have really terrible lives, and how it really is bad for them because they're being hunted, because they can't really live normal lives, and they can't eat the same things people do. Their friendships with human beings are repeatedly put to the test and strained. And worst of all, they keep getting hunted down by these task force members who work for the government, who at best case kill them, and worst case capture them and torture them in order to harvest like their kinks and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, when you have like a whole underground organization devoted to holding death matches and like weird like sadistic characters with weird fetishes, that kind of like takes me out of like appreciating kind of the more thoughtful ruminations and the times where characters are really trying to make critiques of like human nature and human society. Whereas in Parasite, there are some like ridiculous moments in Parasite. Like there's that whole scene with like that lion getting killed by that one parasite that was kind of extraneous and bizarre. But in general, like Parasite is much more down to earth and much more thoughtful in the way it portrays the parasites as a collective and a community, and as what they are, and also how they frame the human reaction towards them. There aren't like terribly sadistic people who are going around and hunting parasites and gleefully laughing as they cut them up. There aren't like parasites who gleefully kill humans for fun and hold like big underground coliseums, you know, to like for sport or whatever. Like it's a much more thoughtful and interesting take on what it means to survive, what it means to be a human being, and also just how we see ourselves as society in general. I think that's a big weakness of Tokyo Ghoul, is that it's just too over the top in parts, and it has some of these ridiculous characters that what it tries to do in terms of its in terms of its how it explores its themes doesn't quite always work for me. That said, I don't think Tokyo Ghoul is a bad read. On the contrary, I do enjoy reading it. I think that as far as character development goes, I like a lot of the characters. I like Kaneki, I like Toka, I like Nishiki, rather. I like a lot of the characters. I do like some of the things it tries to attempt, even if it does undermine it at several points with some more ridiculous elements. But I can see why it's popular. Like, I definitely see what the appeal of the series is. Again, it's basically another take on a vampire story in the same manner Attack on Titan is another take on a zombie survival story. And so it's a very kind of relatable concept in a way. And it also has a lot of stuff that I see would really appeal to a wide mainstream audience. So I definitely see the appeal here, and I definitely think there are a lot of merits to the series. I think that if I were to compare, like, it to Parasite is, like, easily superior as a series, in my book, and I like that more. But Tokyo Ghoul is not a bad read at all, and I do plan to finish it and, read its sequel series, too.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to follow that up. There's a reason I only read the first volume, was because I had a feeling I wasn't going to like it enough to want to continue. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna count Tokyo Ghoul out just yet. I mean, again, from what I read a lot of setup, so I didn't really get a chance. I didn't get a chance to get into like the real meat of what's going on and what you were describing to me. And I mean, it all sounds like it could be kind of hit or miss for me, honestly. But I feel like I'm not gonna drop Tokyo Ghoul completely, but I think this is something I'd rather wait until it's over. Like, this isn't something I'd want to actively keep up with, honestly.
Well, I mean, the first series is technically over, even if it's not completely published over here.
That's true. I forgot there's a sequel series. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I'd rather just kind of like drop this for now and maybe get on to other things I'd rather read, because again, I didn't dislike it at all, but like while I was reading it, I was just kind of like, man, when is this going to be over? I mean, that sounds really bad, but it was just like, again, like I can't blame the first volume in particular for this, because it is a lot of setup, and it's a lot of Kaneki trying to come to terms with the fact that he is becoming a ghoul, and that he is going to have to make some kind of changes in his life now that he can't eat the same things humans can. And it's really just a lot of him struggling with that up until like the very end of the volume. It seems like he's on his way to either accepting who he is, or maybe trying to figure out a way to live as both a ghoul and a human, respectively. But I don't know. There were moments that I liked, but there weren't enough of them to keep me wanting to read. So yeah, I think I'm gonna put Tokyo Ghoul in the pile of I'll get to it eventually.
Personally, I found the first volume interesting, and the way it's set up, like the conflict, Kaneki's moral conflict that will last through the rest of the series, and like trying to figure out like what exactly he is and where he really belongs in terms of these spears that he's now both a part of. And then I think the second volume continues off of that point and like really fleshes out what the struggles that ghouls face, and then also really humanizes a lot of that community like very well. And then of course I think that as it goes along, I do think that there are really good points to like Kaneki's character development. I don't think it's as compelling as Shinichi's and Parasite nearly as much, but I do think that there are interesting characters and interesting viewpoints in Tokyo Ghoul. I think I do think that the series does do interesting things with its concept, but there are problems, sure, but I did enjoy reading. I did enjoy reading it for what I've read, really. I mean, there are problems I have with it, but they don't turn me off from the series necessarily so much as I think to myself, you could have done that better. This didn't have to be this ridiculous.
I mean, I really hate saying this because I know it's not fair, but like, it didn't grab me, at least not right off the bat.
That's not unfair at all. If it didn't like grab you, then maybe it's just not for you. That's perfectly fair. Like, not everything is for everyone.
It's something that I think, again, I have this weird way of categorizing manga where Tokyo Ghoul is something I think I'm not opposed to reading more of it, but like, it didn't make me want to go to the next volume right away is the thing. It's something that I think I'd rather just take my time on and maybe get back to it at some point. But, knowing everybody who listens to this knows I have a lot of other things that I should be reading, stuff that I need to get better about reading more stuff in general. But I don't know, like, I'm very mixed on it, but again, it didn't make me want to read more. Like, I'll just get to it when I get to it, is how I really feel about it. Not that I think it's bad, just I feel like this is a series where the hype kind of kills it for me a little bit, because I know there are a lot of people who really like this, and obviously it shows in the manga best-selling list on the New York Times list or whatnot, and as we've talked about on the podcast before, it always does really well. And I mean, I don't really know what else to say other than I'll just get back to it whenever.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally forgot something else that I thought of while reading this, and that series like this, which have characters who have to keep secrets and feel ostracized from a society as a whole. A lot of those stories are very relatable to minorities, and especially the LGBT community. In the same manner, X-Men is the concept of X-Men is very in terms of the way that's handled, how that really resonates with the LGBT community and comments on it. Tokyo Ghoul sort of has the same appeal, even though I don't think it intentionally really does anything to address or provide an actual commentary on it, so much as it reflects kind of the feelings some people might have in terms of feeling alienated and kind of another existence within a larger society. But what I think, so I think that that's another just element of its appeal. I just forgot to mention that earlier. But as far as readability goes, I personally did find Tokyo Ghoul very readable. I didn't have any problems jumping from the end of Volume 1 to Volume 2 and so on. I actually was planning to finish it before we talked about it today, but I just didn't get time. But I probably will finish off the series, pretty soon, and then, move on to the sequel series. I have problems with it, but I do think there are merits to it that I do like, and I do like the characters. So I definitely think that it's not a very, thoughtful, psychological, or, necessarily even mature series in how it handles its subject matter.
But there's blood. That means it's mature.
Yeah, there's buckets of blood and lots of nudity. That's instant maturity.
Yeah.
But no, it's not quite as thoughtful and as well put together as Parasite, in my opinion, in terms of what it's trying to do. But at the same time, as just I don't want to really say popcorny, because that feels like I'm not giving it enough credit there, but kind of just enjoyable kind of action series. It's enjoyable in terms of that, and I think it's pretty readable and a pretty fast read, honestly. If it interests you, I don't think I think that you can check it out and you'll probably like it just fine. I don't love it by any means, but I see the appeal of it. I see the merits of it, and I think there is a lot it does well, and there is things about it I like, so I will continue reading it.
I'll get to it whenever. I agree with Sid. I agree that there are merits to it, but I think personally, it's just not something I'm willing to get on right away. But I think that about does it for our thoughts on Tokyo Ghoul. I hope people didn't stop listening halfway through. They're like, these guys don't like Tokyo Ghoul? Well, I'm deleting this podcast. Oh man, I am so hungry. So Sid, we don't have any emails or anything, right?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, thank God. Okay, we can end the show.
Please keep sending us emails.
Send us emails. We like getting emails. I'm in a really lazy mood today, and I just want to stop recording and eat. But we gotta end the show. End the show properly. Words are failing me today. So thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Manga Mavericks. Sid, where can people find you?
You can find me as Lum Ramayasha on Twitter and my anime list. You can also find me on Animation Revelation, and you can read my reviews of manga on allcomic.com.
All right. Wow, that was really concise. So as for me, you can find me on Twitter at SniperKing323. That's SNIPERKING323. I do a lot of other podcasts, just to mention them real quick. I mentioned Life Lessons earlier. If you like Gintama and you want to hear more of my thoughts on it, you can go listen to Life Lessons, the Gintama Manga Cast. That's at gintalifelessons.wordpress.com. You can also hear me talk about Detective Conan / Case Closed on One Podcast Prevails at onepodcastprevails.wordpress.com. Or if you want to hear me talk about Toriko, you can listen to the Heavenly Kings podcast at heavenlykings.wordpress.com. But as for Manga Mavericks and All Comic, you can find more of Manga Mavericks on all-comic.com, or you can follow us on facebook.com/all.comic or on twitter.com/allcomic_. And like Sid said, I know this episode's kind of running long and I'm hungry, and that's why I'm happy we don't have any emails, but usually, I look forward to having somebody, email us about, whatever manga they're reading or what they think about the medium in general, any thoughts they might have on any news happening. So don't let my general assholishness discourage you from emailing us anything about manga in general at mangamavericks@gmail.com. Please send us some emails. We'll read them on the show. But the most important thing, guys, is that you subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. And I think that's really about it from all of us here at allcomic.com. We hope you enjoyed episode 11 of Manga Mavericks, and we'll see you guys in the next 2 weeks. See ya.
Sayonara.